Hi guys, so today's video is going to be a list of books that I think have fantastic, really gripping openings. I recently did basically a part 1 to this where I talked about books that I think are fantastic, but it takes a while before you really feel invested, and these are the exact opposite. Half of the books on this list are adult and then half are young adult, so I am going to alternate between them. And also I just want to say that while I do think some of these have great openings, that doesn't necessarily mean that they are fast-paced throughout, but that I don't think is true of this first one. This first one, for me, had me at the very beginning, and then it basically never slowed down. And that would be A Curse So Dark and Lonely by Brigid Kemmerer. This was all the rage for a while, so I'm sure a lot of you are very aware of the setup. It is a Beauty and the Beast retelling and a portal fantasy. So the female point of view, of which there are two, there's a female and a male perspective, and the girl, she is in our own world. She has her own issues in her personal life that immediately very much endear you to her, but she is taken from her life, her sense of normalcy, and then all of a sudden winds up in this fantasy land, and there is a prince who is cursed. He's handsome all the time. It's not where he's normally a beast and then he gets handsome at the end. It's that he has this curse put on him. He has to find somebody to fall in love with him, and if he does not, at the end of every season, he turns into a monster. He cannot control this monster, and that monster kills people. He is filled with grief and guilt, but he keeps trying because he doesn't know how to break this curse any other way. So I think that despite the fact that, you know, it's one of those like, does the girl have Stockholm Syndrome or not? It's one of those situations where you feel for the girl immediately because she was taken from her home. But then this guy, you're also like, well, dang, that also sounds like it sucks a lot. Next up, we have Warbreaker by Brandon Sanderson. This is currently a standalone. There's potential for a sequel, but you can read it all by its lonesome and it will be a completed story. This is a setup where we have these two sisters, one of which has been groomed her whole life to fulfill a marriage alliance to a neighboring kingdom that her people think are terrible. And then her sister is this little bubbly, I have no care in the world individual, and she's never had to worry about politics. But because of some unusual circumstances, there's a parent trap situation and they have to switch places, not really of their own free will. And now the young, bubbly, carefree sister is the one that's forced into this situation she knows not at all how to handle, and then the older sister is like, I have to go rescue my little sister, but she doesn't know what the heck she's doing either. And then in the middle of all this, this other kingdom has these beings that are returned from the dead, and they are these godlike beings that at some point died. They don't know how they died. People won't tell them how they died, but people worship them like they are gods and goddesses on Earth. And one of these characters is named Lightsong. He is hilarious. He basically is a god that doesn't believe in gods, essentially, even though he is one. But throughout all of this, there are definitely some inner workings within the court where the gods and goddesses live. You don't really know what's going on, but these two sisters and then this individual, as well as some others, are trying to figure out exactly this mystery behind the scenes. And the very opening chapter, I think, is so intriguing. I think that it is very mysterious, and you definitely want to know what's going on, especially because the magic system in this book has to do with colors and being able to sort of make inanimate objects come to life and obey commands. But it requires breath, of which every individual has one breath, and some people feel this is your soul, but you can give your breath to someone else, and if somebody has a bunch of those, then they have heightened senses, they have extra abilities, and you don't really quite understand how all of it works, but in the opening chapter, it just really pulls you in. You're like, whoa, what the heck's going on? But I think in a good way, not in a, I give up, this is too confusing kind of way. Next up, we have Scythe by Neil Shusterman. This follows a futuristic society that you're probably going to have to suspend disbelief for, but that's kind of the case with any kind of dystopian type novel, futuristic novel. But the setup is that we have conquered death in essentially every way. We have no threat to us anymore except for the threat of overpopulation, and mankind's super intelligent way of dealing with this is to have a select group of people called Scythes just kill people for their jobs. These are revered individuals, and it's expected for them to treat their jobs with a lot of respect. And the opening line of the book is from a journal entry of one of these Scythes. you get a lot of these journal entries throughout the story. But the very first line says, "We must, by law, keep a record of the innocents we kill." And I remember when I picked up this book, I was like, this sounds hokey, but I'll give it a try. That sounds interesting enough. And then I read that opening line, I was like, okay, you got me. Next up is a book that I didn't personally care for, but I'm always open to suggesting books even if I didn't really like them, because, you know, books are subjective and you might enjoy them. And this one definitely has an opening that I thought the opening was one of the best parts of the book, and that would be Rage of Dragons. This story follows a young man in a militaristic society who is out for revenge. The main reasons why I see other individuals like myself not really love the book is because the main character's personality is basically revenge. There's a ton of action, there's a ton of training sequences, and I'm a character-driven reader. I love getting to soak in the deep emotions of characters, and I love a good revenge story, but for me, I have to kind of root for the character when it's a revenge story, and I was just like, but come on, man, you're so dumb. But I think that if you like action-packed stories, if you don't need all the, like, let's talk about our feelings kinds of stories, then this one will probably be right up your alley. It is incredibly fast-paced throughout, and the opening, it doesn't actually follow the main character. It follows some people in the past, the people that kind of are the ancestors of the present-day society, and them coming to this island, and there's interesting magic that has to do with hulking some people up. There's magic that has to do with calling down dragons. And I just think that the opening is incredibly intriguing, definitely makes you want to know how this magic system works. And that is one of the things about the book that I think is a highlight, is that the magic system is really creative. Sticking with another book that I didn't personally love, but I know it is very well loved, and it would be another Sanderson book, and that would be Steelheart. And the setup for this one is basically, what if Superman and superheroes were all really bad? What would society look like? And we follow a main character who something sad happened in their past, and as a result, they want revenge against one of these superheroes, but he's just a normal guy, and the stakes are incredibly high. You have no idea how this average Joe is going to possibly take down the bad guy. And the opening of the book, I think it is one of the best Sanderson openings, because you immediately feel for the character. In Rage of Dragons, there is a scene that is supposed to be the scene that represents why the character wants revenge so bad, and I just didn't really think that scene, it didn't fuel me to have this fire in me that wanted this revenge alongside the reader. But in Steelheart, I got it. I saw this scene in the opening, and I'm like, I feel you, man. I'm right there with you. I didn't love the story throughout for other reasons, but I still think that opening is fantastic. But because I didn't love the story in its entirety, I wanted to also shout out The Rithmatist. If you are looking for a younger aged book that has a male protagonist the way that Steelheart does, I loved Joel from The Rithmatist, and I immediately felt for Joel in this one. He is a cinnamon roll. He's a sweetheart. He really cares about his mom, and he goes to this school where there are magic users, and he is not able to use magic. There are other non-magical kids at this school, but he is obsessed with the magic system, and I just immediately fell for him, you know? He's like that kid on campus that's really into magic, and everybody's like, just get over it, man, you can't use magic, and he's like, but it's so cool, I think it's so cool, and you're like, oh, I wish you could use it, and I just think he's so sweet. I immediately loved him and adored him, and so I was immediately invested in the story. Plus, the magic is really cool. It has to do with geometric shapes, essentially, that you draw with chalk, and you kind of have these defensive bubbles that you use the chalk to create, and then you can create little chalk monsters, I call them, and you can kind of give them commands, and then they can go battle, and I just thought it was so cool. I'd never really seen a magic system like that. Next up, we have Queen of Blood by Sarah Beth Durst. This is the first book in a fantasy trilogy, one that I think has an amazing setting. If you are looking for a creepy forest setting, this one has got it. However, mankind essentially has to live in this creepy forest, and the reason it's so creepy is because there are these beings known as spirits, and the spirits have some interesting instincts, one of which is basically just kill humans. And so the humans have a queen who has magical abilities, and she can basically keep the spirits in check so that they can continue humans to live within the forest. They can't try to outright destroy all the spirits. Won't really work. The spirits are needed in order to keep the forest alive, keep the rivers flowing. So it's kind of a double-edged sword. And the opening of the story is we follow our main character. I don't want to tell you too much, but let's just say the spirits show up at the beginning and you're like, oh dang, it's really intense, kind of violent to be honest. And it immediately, I think, set the stakes so high. Plus, it immediately also made you feel for the main character, as well as gave you a pretty good idea of what this forest spirits are capable of. Next up, we have Ash Princess by Laura Sebastian, and this is one of those books that I feel weird saying it was super entertaining given the synopsis, which is that our main character was the former heir to a kingdom that was conquered, and the conquerors kept her alive so they can use her against her own people. So if they try to rebel, they can publicly harm her and basically be like, this is what happens if you try to cross us. So her life sucks. She's kind of openly mocked all the time throughout the court of the invaders who now sit on the throne, and she kind of lives among them, but is obviously a prisoner, and she's not really a person anymore. She's kind of a shell of her former self, but something at the beginning gives her a spark of hope, and she decides, all right, I'm done being used against my people. It's time that I start trying to live for them and do something from the inside. So there's a lot of intrigue, not really a ton of action, but I do think that the stakes, they are just so high right away that I couldn't help but be engrossed immediately. And I do think that this book is fairly tropey. And that's part of, I think, what makes the entertainment factor go up so much, but it is very fast-paced. I always want to know what was going to happen next. And while I do think that the first two are fairly tropey, the third one really impressed me and really surprised me. It's just a trilogy, but I will say if you pick this one up and you're looking for something fun and entertaining, I'm sorry, I know it sounds terrible to say, give it the synopsis, but if you're looking for something fun and entertaining, the first two definitely have it, and then the third one gets really sad, and I was like, oh, okay, well, that solidified it. It's definitely a favorite trilogy of mine, not my all-time favorite. Mistborn is, but still, I really enjoyed it. Next up is a story that I don't by any means think is fast-paced at the beginning, but the emotional impact, it hit me so hard in those first 50 pages, but especially just the very opening, I immediately was like, oh, okay, I'm in for a ride with this one. And that would be Red Rising by Pierce Brown. The first 55 pages, so basically part one of the book, they are what kind of kept me going throughout the book because it is kind of a revenge story, but it's definitely one where the main character, unlike Tao from Rage of Dragons, who goes into rage mode, the main character of this one, Darrow, kind of goes undercover. That's the setup for the story, is that we have a main character who loses a lot that is very important to him. He essentially has no hope, but some individuals kind of nudge him in the direction of revenge and decide that he needs to be used as a catalyst for rebellion. So in their society, they have a caste system based off of colors, and the colors literally do represent different physical features. So his group, the Reds, are much smaller. The Golds, who are the ruling group, they're much larger. They're like perfect specimen of human beings, and they suck. They hate everybody, and they just think they're above everyone else, and it's their obligation to rule all the little dumb people. And Darrow is going to go undercover and try to infiltrate the Golds and bring the color caste system down. But man, the opening, it's so emotional. I do think after that the book, it is, I mean, it's still a good book, but the second one, a lot of people love the second one a lot more than the first, because the second one is way more sci-fi, way more opened up. There's a lot more action in the second one, which actually, as a result, I ended up liking the first more than the second because I like the emotional stuff. But the third one, I personally think is such a great combination of both the action and the emotions. Plus, every time you're like, things can't possibly get any worse, Pierce Brown, the little evil genius he does, he makes things so much worse. Anyway, thanks so much for watching. I hope you have a fantastic rest of your day. I'll have the other video with rough starts, but that overall I think are great books linked down below. But anyway, I'll see you guys later. Bye.